Hello and most welcome to 1948 of the H series. Most welcome. We will today continue with A Tale of Two Problems, Wittgenstein's discussion of aspect perception. Aspect perception by Severin Schroeder. Last time we took a look at that. How can you say this? This is difficult. In certain specific circumstances, for instance, in an ambigram, you can have a lightning effect that something changes. It will last only a second or even less. And then all of a sudden you have something else there. It just presents itself and it comes just like a snap of a finger. Quickly. In my words here, and I'm probably going to change them, Wittgenstein is using this to show that's the case in all of language and the world. Word and word. Almost homonyms. So aspect is always there, and we change aspect constantly. Could be that we are so used to it and we forgot that in childhood it was sort of still there somewhere in the background, how different things could be. But then as time goes by, we get slowly stuck. We get entrenched. Things seems to be only one thing all the time. We become more and more slouched and monosemic, less flexible in our thinking capacities, less happy, less energetic. All those things comes by time, and we start thinking the world is seen exactly the same by everyone. We become monosemic, if you like. Monosemic. We are no longer playing the game. The game plays us, I would say. This is what Edward de Bono calls stone logic. This is the new academia, which my old professor called the antidote to intelligence. I remember that. The idea that everything is preset, determined from the beginning, with a big chop or a big bang, and it's going to end in a big crunch. Something that we looked into called finitism. Oddly enough, it's very similar to the idea already put forward by Plato in, for instance, the dialogues, that the knowledge has always been there, and the only purpose is that you do the moiety, you born it once more. The knowledge, the forms were there from the very beginning. This is questioned by Wittgenstein and Schroeder to show that it is more open-ended, not as fixed, It does not at the same time mean that there is a grand dichotomy between puzzle and object, as Kalle pointed out a couple of times. It is still interwoven and ingrained in each other. We sort of say, do not lose one thing as we gain another. There's no loss here. Yeah, it's noteworthy. That was a good side there. Thank you, Kalle. It is noteworthy that here Wittgenstein applies the seeing as locution to ordinary and unambiguous pictures, not only to puzzle pictures that can be seen first as one thing and then as another. No, it's a helping tool to show that the whole world is that way. And language. Language, world, and language, world. And I'll continue my read where I ended off. Page, well, we're already in 358. Seeing or interpreting. What a great title. Yes, it's correct. Thank you. Seeing or interpreting. Are visual aspects actually seen? Or are they only thought of an interpretation? Of course, we commonly say that we see aspects, but one may suspect that that is only a conventional figure of speech, a derivative, metonymically use of the word see. See. Just as one speaks of marrying money, although of course one does not literally marry money, but rather a rich spouse. Spouse. Again, consider Wittgenstein's analogy with the phenomenon of secondary meaning. Under certain circumstances, we are prepared to apply color words to vowels. Or the words fat and meager to days of the week. Of the week. Of the week. Of the week. but we are always prepared to add that this is just a quirk of language. Of course, the letter E is not really yellow, and Wednesday is not really fat. Fat. Similarly, it might be held that an aspect is not really seen, but only thought of or associated with one's vision. Vision coming. Thus, Berkeley insists that the ideas of space, outness, and things placed at a distance are not strictly speaking the object of sight. Sight, sight, or sight. All we actually see are configurations of color. Anything else can only be suggested to the mind by the mediation of some other idea, which is itself perceived in the act of seeing. 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 Against Berkeley, and more generally, against the view that aspects are only interpretations, Wittgenstein makes the following points. Points. One, to interpret is to think, to do something. Seeing is a state. A state. That is, seeing has genuine duration. One can ask for how long one saw the drawing as a duck before it changed into a rabbit. Rabbit. Where it sounds incongruous to ask for the duration of an interpretation of an interpretation. Two, when we interpret, we form hypotheses which may prove false, whereas I see this figure as a can be verified as little as or only in the same sense as I see a bright red, a bright red, a bright red. This, however, is problematic. For one thing, seeing two tends to involve taking something to be true, true, which may conceivably turn out to be false. For instance, if it is an illusion or hallucination. And my seeing as can also turn out to be true or false. For instance, when in the dark I see a suspicious human figure, what in truth is only a bush.
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 Bush. I'm Bush.
Or to take one of Wittgenstein's examples, I suddenly seem to recognize an old friend.
Old friend.
Old, seeing his former face in an older one, older one. But then it turns out that it wasn't him after all. After all, hooch, hooch. Of course, seeing something as X need not involve any belief that it actually is X. But then, similarly, one can retreat from hypothesizing to mere imagining.
imagining, imagine all the people. Na, 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 Ipsy and na, na, na.
That is both on the side of vision and on the side of thinking. One can distinguish between taking something to be true and merely toying with an idea. Idea. Thus, the fact that many cases of seeing as belong to the latter category may show that they cannot be construed as interpreting, yet more importantly, it is not enough to set them apart from thinking and vindicate them as proper seeing.
Proper seeing.
Three, if seeing something as X were only an interpretation, a satirical or fictional, superimposed on what is actually seen, it should be possible to describe what is actually seen, the uninterpreted data, but typically we cannot
Reach the essence.
saying, I see it as, is not just an indirect description of the visual experience. That could be replaced by a more direct one.
Direct one.
It is the most appropriate report of what I see.
What I see.
Or in some cases, it would perhaps be possible to replace the expression of an aspect perception, for instance, the three-dimensional impression of a landscape, or a facial expression. Or a facial expression by a Berkeleyan description in terms of mere colors and shapes, but only after special instruction and practice. Four, as already explained above, when we see a picture as representing something, we do not read it like a blueprint, but respond to it as to the object represented. I don't know what the problem came there. As already explained, the aspect is directly perceived and not only thought or known to be there as a result of an interpretation. From my part, maybe. This experience of actual perception is also manifest in certain emphatic expressions, such as the sphere in the picture seems to float. Float. One sees it floating. It floats. or of an I represented by a
dot.
Oh,
Dot.
see how's it looking.
See how it is looking. Indeed.
5.
As finally,
already.
as already noted,
Seeing as is essentially noticing a resemblance, an internal relation between an object and other objects.
real or imagined. Imagined.
Imagined. But the act of noticing a visual resemblance cannot be construed as distinct from that of seeing the resemblance. Do you hear me? It is widely interesting. Wow! But the act of noticing a visual resemblance cannot be construed as distinct from that of seeing the resemblance. It happens at once. But the noticing, when it occurs while looking, is not a mental operation distinct from seeing. Rather, it is
Seeing.
those are the conceptual justifications for calling visual aspect perception seeing. Seeing. Seeing.
Seeing.
The observation invoked in the last point 5, namely that in aspect perception one experiences a comparison, serves also to dissolve two apparent objections to calling it seeing, which focus on the way aspect perception can change.
Can change. Indeed.
Indeed, how it changed and why it changed. The first objection is that since when I suddenly see something differently, for instance, switch from seeing a drawing as a duck to seeing it as a rabbit, the object itself remains unchanged. Unchanged. Unchain my heart. The change can only be one of interpretation. 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 The lighting up of an aspect is essentially a subjective experience. Subjective experience. Erlebnis. And not a truthful cognition of an object. Even though it is reported as if it were a visual perception. Perception. A perception through the eyes. Indeed. A second objection to accepting seeing as a proper case of seeing is that unlike veridical perception, it is subject to the will, to the will, to the will, to the power of the will. There is such an order as now I see the figure like that, like this, but not now I see this leaf green. Oh no, we wouldn't, would we? Would we? No. Not possible. However, once we appreciate the essentially relational character of aspect perception, that is, That is that it involves an awareness of a resemblance between what is seen and something else. It is no wonder that aspects can change, although the object remains the same. The same. The same. Just as Socrates can, without undergoing any intrinsic change, be found first tall and then short, depending on who we compare him with. With. Not supposed to end the sentence in the proposition. Or can you? And of course, respects of comparison can be changed at will. At will. Will. Nonetheless, aspect perception can be said to identify an objective feature of the object. Namely, a relation of likeness between it and some other object. Even if the latter is arbitrarily chosen. Chosen arbitrarily. Hence, inasmuch as it picks out an actual resemblance, it is of course a form of perception. Perception. Seeing as is seeing all right, but a kind of seeing that is particularly concept laden, typically more so than seeing shapes and colors. I think colors here could be a good pause for 1949. Colors,
Yes.
shapes and colors, we can say even. Colors! And we have 1949.
360.
Page 360. Indeed. I thought this text was especially good with connection to Derrida, and there is some interesting points here. I need some light. Could you give me some? Because when I put the collar on, I can hardly see the. You can just take this one. Yeah, that's enough. If we go to page 359. Or we can even go to 358, actually. And the question is, of course, is it seeing or interpreting? And number one, to interpret, that's the third paragraph named number one again. It's the second number one. Roman number one. To interpret is to think. To do something, seeing is a state. That is, seeing has genuine duration. One can ask for how long one saw the drawing as a duck before it changed to a rabbit. Rabbit, rabbit. Whereas it sounds incongruous to ask for duration of an interpretation. Well, indeed, yeah. And then go to the place I mentioned before. Third line there, of course, and this is also helpful. Seeing something as X need not involve any belief that it actually is X. But then similarly, one can retreat from hypothesizing to mere imagining. And this is very, actually here, the is used in the same way as you pointed out, lost. And, or maybe it's not, but let's pretend it is that. I think it's a good point. To see something as something doesn't involve that it is that. That it's affinitism of some sort. That's it. That is what it is. No more talk. No, not at all. It's open-ended. We go further down, the seventh line. Thus, the fact that many cases of seeing as belong to the latter category may show that they cannot be construed as interpreting. Yet more importantly, it is not enough to set them apart from thinking and vindicate them as proper seeing. If you go into the mode of thinking everything is interpreting, which we do if we become monostemic, Kalle interprets this one way, I do it some other way. It is actually very close to the difference between referent and referred, or referee, reference and referee, or sign and signified. Derrida is here different from Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein is different from Derrida. Wittgenstein, already in the seeing, this essence idea comes. Why? Because in between me and Kalle, there's a cup. We see it differently. Therefore, there is an essence that we cannot see, or just see the shadow of, as Plato would have it. Berkeley is helpful here. Schroeder is elegant by bringing Berkeley in. It's a pedagogical tool. It's not criticism of Berkeley. He tried to set even more things apart. And that can be helpful in this case. He goes to absurdities. In the Berkeleyan worldview, even shape has nothing to do with color and distance and length. It is separate. But we know shape cannot be set apart, for instance, from color or texture. Dark objects will always look smaller. There is no exception to that. Brighter ones are bigger. This is the terms of the world. We do a similar thing when we start thinking it's interpretation. And then we end up, if we overuse the word interpretation, we end up in the monosyllabic take, and we get a sort of essence. So in the end, when Kalle is referring to the cup and I am doing it, all of a sudden, we have established a difference between word and world. This is now set apart. I used it with a cup. It will look different from the perspective of me and from my colleague. And because of background, Berkeley and followers of T theory, the whole of the world, would say that we see it differently because he is in a different position, he has different knowledge, maybe his eyesight is different from mine, and so on and so on. But there is a true object somewhere. We can't even touch it in the end if we go too far with that. At 4, so let's use Berkeley even more. According to Berkeley and many other peoples in neurology until recently and cognitive science, it was assumed that we only saw like dots of color in here, and in my head I transformed it to the objects. So I would see only like a beige gray shape, and my brain would process that and turn it into it's a cup. No, that doesn't make sense, says Wittgenstein Schroeder. We see directly, without filter, without grid. The sphere in the picture seems to float when actually one sees it floating. The expression, it seems to float, has to do with other factors. Because it's a picture or something, we use that grammar. Go to the 5th little thing here on the same page. And finally, as already noted, seeing as is essentially noticing a resemblance, an internal relation between an object and other objects, real or imagined. But the act of noticing a visual resemblance cannot be construed as distinct from that of seeing the resemblance. So, and there is an example, seeing an old guy and you think you see your friend in that person, and then you realize you didn't. That could happen, but it doesn't mean that you didn't see what you saw. You still saw the resemblance. Think of family resemblance. It could be helpful here. It is not that you mistook some essential feature of your friend or something like that. He could have looked exactly like your friend, just a bit older, and you saw it that way. You also have an example, 360. It's the second paragraph, fourth line. And once more, we're going to go back to the lighting up of an aspect is essentially a subjective experience. And that's the clue about the epigram and such. So it's me, it's happening for me, it's a first person thing, and you should be careful with it because it's very helpful and it could be something dangerous because it could enforce the idea of interpretation. But the duck rabbit is always a duck rabbit, or whatever it might be. And therefore, I took this last quote here, and it's the third paragraph, the third line. You could say it's grammatically correct. This is why he points it out. We get tricked by grammar. Now I see the figure like this. Something changed. But you wouldn't say, now I see this leaf green. The greenness and the leaf come together directly. And this is most usually the case. There is no filter or interpreting factors here. Kalle, please come in.
Micro.
So the question is, what is seeing?
Seeing, yeah. Couldn't just move it a bit close to seeing. What is it?
Yes. So so the question is it interpreted here in the Roman numbers, Roman numeral 1, to interpret is to think, to do something.
Is a state.
State. If I understand correctly, they are the same thing because it would be impossible to separate them. Would you agree, Hans?
Yeah, to some extent, yeah, sure, yeah. Seeing is a bit more, it takes duration. But interpreting is the snap of the finger. Like the old friend. The moment it changes from being your old friend to not being your friend, it doesn't really take time. It happens in an instance.
Yes, but I would emphasize that it's not possible to separate interpreting from seeing. Because how would it? When you say a duck, it's a duck. But what would be the interpretative aspect of that?
It's just when it changes, in the changing.
In changing, it would be become interpretation, you mean?
Yeah, it's like just when the duck goes to the rabbit, which doesn't take time, that's the moment of what he calls interpretation.
So Wittgenstein would say, no, I understand that he says that seeing and interpreting is the same thing. Because how would you possibly separate them? Any separation could be artificial.
Well, you can't separate them, but it's I think it's a pedagogical trick to show something.
But okay, here I disagree then with Wittgenstein. But okay. Okay, let me go to something else. It's number 5 this time. It's on page 360, I think, the number 5. Where do we have? No, it's okay, page 360, and then the third paragraph. So, a second objection to accepting seeing as a proper case of seeing is that, unlike veridical perception, it is subject to the will. There is such an order as now see the figure like this, but not now see this leaf green. So we have to see these are two imperatives that you could perhaps say to me, Kalle, as you were to say, now see this is leaf green. So you order me to see this as a leaf green.
Well, I think in the first example I could convince you. That's the point of it. But in the second, it wouldn't really work.
Okay, so
it all depends, and it's a scale.
Yes, but there is something else that I want to point out in the same paragraph. Here, this is a little bit ambiguous. And this raises the question, namely, it is the subject to the will. Do we have free will or not? The question comes here indirectly by a play of words, so to say. It is the subject to the will. And I say here also that you cannot separate. So in the same manner as I would say that seeing is interpreting and seeing is also willing.
Yeah, I know what you mean by interpreting. In that sense, yes, it's the same thing. If you use the term that way, it will be the same thing as seeing. But Wittgenstein is trying to invent a new way of using the word interpreting.
Which is?
Very hard to explain, but it's the change, the second it changes, only in that instant. And it's a pedagogical tool because it's the same with the anagram.
The pedagogical tool is too hard. So I would. And I think actually, okay. I will not emphasize my point, but I would say that the main lesson could be the indirect. My lesson is that we have free will. Why so?
Oh yeah, of course.
Because seeing is willing, and willing is interpreting. So when you see a duck, and you say, because objects in themselves, they are dead. Objects are lazy, as Wittgenstein says in another
they don't
passage.
do much.
They don't do anything.
No,
They're lazy.
no,
The
no,
pictures
no.
are lazy. Instead, it's the observer. So the observation, willing, and will, and interpretation are one and the same thing. So I have to actually, when I see a duck, I must actually want, or have a will that is actually a duck.
With your permission, if I rephrase what you say, it was interesting you brought in free will. It doesn't really come in here, but it's good anyway. But if, for instance, you have this essence, that everything is like you interpret it one way and I do it another way, and that gets the idea that there is an essential cup that we cannot see. That will actually limit the free will. You will get a sense, well, my seeing is not the real seeing, so to speak. And that will limit the free will. And it's actually very close to classical physics. Very good, Kalle.
Yes, essentialism.
It's a sort of essentialism, yes.
Yes, essentialism deadens the free will.
Yeah, definitely.
And here actually there was, with example with Socrates, let me see. Respects, let me see, we had that phrase here. And here, this is very good.
It's quite good, actually, not bad.
And they're here to make a play with the words. Respect, comparison, will.
Yeah.
So when we see Socrates tall or so short, it actually depends on my free will.
Well, you get a free will because you look everywhere, you can look there, you can look there. if you're not so that stuck into essentialism, that he has a certain height, you will have more quantum relativity, and then you have a free will. And it's a gliding scale between the essentialist and going here to further getting more and more free will.
Yes, perhaps that's the most significant lesson for today is that essentialism kills the free will.
I wouldn't use the term kills.
Yeah, but let's exaggerate for pedagogical reasons. Essentialism kills free will
Yeah.
because, let's say something easy, because we have to both agree that because we both have to agree that this cup is big, for instance.
Yeah, it has a certain height, 15 centimeters or something like that.
No, yes, it's also.
It's a limitation.
Well, so it kills that this cup is big because I would say no, this is small to me because I want a lot of cappuccino.
Or maybe there's a big cup that only you can see and I can't see it. So the pedagogical thing here is also very close to the Saussurian referent and referee. Because in the end, what I see, my interpretation as the Wittgenstein use will be only a sign. Will be the actual cup anymore. But he saves the actual cup, he saves the real word, and at the same time, now this is my point of view, he brings in all creativity that's possible. And as you say, free will. Because with essentialism, it's very hard with any free will. This is the pressure of everything is predestined. A cup has that certain thing. And it has an origin as well. We won't go into origin here. Don't fear. But you get my drift. So it could be passed on to time. It is very close to the other Price article here, where he has difficulty with that the veil is covering the emptiness. No, rather, what you see is what you get. It's not empty. The emptiness comes from the idea that it should be an essence somewhere. So you perceive the whole thing. And then you have presence and absence. No problem. You do not get caught up in contradictions anymore. And I hope you also get Berkeley. He goes too far because he says in the end, the only thing you see are dots of colors, which is an absurdity, of course. And Schroeder has no intention of criticizing Berkeley because there's no use, there's no reason for do that. But it goes to show when you bring it reductio ad absurdum, it gets so crazy. And I met people who had that point of view. This is the state in neurology in the late 90s, was actually that. So there's a sort of interpreting process. No free will, as you would say. And everything gets very, like, unfree. Like, if he's humorless, Plato didn't have a humor. There's no creativity, there's no humor, it's just essences. And you wake up in the morning and everything looks the same. It doesn't. It's an absurdity. We still have objects. Well, it was a vivid discussion. Thank you very much. Kalle, what do you say? Should we end there? I say thank you to you, Kalle, and thank you everyone for listening in. Have a very nice morning, day, or afternoon. Bye-bye for now.